This was meant to be a big video. Yeah, bigger than the duration you're seeing it at. It's been a personal project of mine for several months. Ever since the release of this expansion, I stayed up several nights until 5 in the morning, script writing, putting together spell information, checking my math, testing rotations, openers, replaying so much content throughout the levels, recollecting my time with min eye level rating, editing on Vegas, fighting Vegas when it would crash 5 times a day, photoshopping nearly every asset on my own, learning various tools and tricks around G-Pose, fighting procrastination, anxiety, depression to get motivation to keep on pushing and working, asking friends and others for their opinions on Black Mage and their experiences, redoing what needed to be redone for 7.05, then once again for 7.1, with whatever so-called free time I could manage to have from working double shifts over the weekend to pay rent and feed myself and my cat. All to create what was meant to be a guide on how to play Black Mage from level 1 to level 100. Unfortunately, with what appeared to be a semi-rework less than a week away, much of the lessons and even jokes I made just don't work anymore. It devastated me. So much time and work amounting to nothing. On the bright side, had I finished this guide earlier, I probably would have felt even worse. I had finalized everything up to the end of level 60, rendering everything, just before the point I would have begun Stormblood content with level 62 plus leveling. But of course, minutes after I had rendered the first entire half of the video, the 7.2 live letter aired. But after some thinking, letting it sink in, I'm not going to let what I worked on go to waste. And that's what I'm presenting to you all here. The first hour, the first half, on a guide of what could have been. A guide on how to play pre-7.2 Black Mage. Even though much of the lessons and jokes are already outdated, hopefully you can find some entertainment with it. Maybe some new players might find some helpful info on it that still works now. Lessons on how to slidecast, to focus on uptime, to understand your kit early, raid buffs, etc., to craft a good Black Mage player from the very beginning, and for it to be a glimpse as to what we had before our longtime friend, the timer, went away. I hope you enjoy it, and feel free to like and comment what you think and any feedback you'd want to give. I don't want to give up on a guide at all, and it'll take me a lot of time to go back and redo everything for 7.2. At least until 7.3 might change it all again. I present Black Mage, level 1 to 60. A guide on what once was.
The court finds you guilty of all charges.
Objection! What am I being sentenced for?
That's not how objecting works. And you are guilty for the abhorrent, abominable crime of liking Heavensward Bard.
Why are you booing me? Casting made sense. You have to pull back the string. It was fun.
The court sentences you to community service. You must teach new players how to be a Black Mage.
That's it? I mean, I was gonna do that anyway.
And no more Final Fantasy XIV videos.
What? On what grounds for that? That's not fair.
Because you're annoying.
Yeah, alright, that's fair. Man, what am I gonna do for content now? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, new student. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Kit. I'm a variety streamer, former on-content Savage Raider, and current min eye level Raider, and I've been playing since Heavensward, 9 years ago. I've played plenty of RPGs, Western and Eastern, and in almost all of them, I gravitate towards mages. Since my toddler years, pissing the bed, and playing Diablo 2 at the age of 3, the Sorceress has been my go-to. I love magic. I love lightning, storms, teleporting, fire, blowing shit up.
Demolitions expert. What? Since when? Explosions, flames, burning things. Demolitions expert, okay.
And since starting the game at the tail end of 3.1, I picked up Thaumaturge. Staves? Spells? Damage? Perfect. Even with the many casters this game has to offer, Black Mage remains my favorite. I just can't put it down. I debated on switching mains to Red Mage when Stormblood dropped, switching to Summoner when it got its big rework in Endwalker, and once again switching to Pictomancer with Dawntrail. Every time, I don't budge. None of the other casters make me feel the way Black Mage does, and it's hard to put it into words. I love how different it is. I love the slow casts, the many tricks you can do, how rewarding it can be when you really understand it deeply, the big numbers. I could go on. Ever since I started playing in Heavensward, not only have I made Final Fantasy XIV one of my favorite games of all time, I fell in love with the class almost immediately, especially seeing that beautiful artifact armor. But is it important that there's such a detailed guide like this? If you ask me, yeah, actually. Black Mage is the black sheep of Final Fantasy XIV's classes. It isn't as standardized as other jobs, and it doesn't have combos, and plays differently than current class design.
Welcome on this guide on how to play Final Fantasy XIV. White Mage. 1 Scholar. 1 Save. 1 Mom, press the shiny buttons. Viper, press the shiny buttons. Samurai.
I have the shiniest meat bicycle!
Ninja. Pictomancer.
Some say playing Black Mage is a different game altogether. I find learning Black Mage is best when you start at the beginning, understanding what's there at the foundation of its design, and using all the knowledge you build up over time to turn yourself into a nuking powerhouse. And I'll be the one to guide you through the various ins and outs on how this class works. But before we get started, let's energize ourselves with some rogue energy. Ow!
No sponsorships during community service!
Well, can I at least tell them to like, comment, and subscribe, and that you can support me by donating or subscribing for only $5 to my coffee, and to watch me stream at twitch.tv/KitVT, where I go live every weekday at 3 p.m. CST to keep on supporting and observing my uber autism?
Fine.
Code KIT at rogueenergy.com for 20%. Black Mage is the wizard of Final Fantasy XIV, with elemental spells of ice, fire, lightning, more fire, more ice, even more fire, a lot more fire. Black Mage is the pyromancer of Final Fantasy XIV. It's a mage dedicated to putting out powerful, hard-hitting spells and having its damage be the party's utility. Black Mages study the arenas of a fight to determine the best places to set up shop and lay out incredible numbers and melt bosses down. They can also adapt on the fly by using its arsenal of spells for the right moment to dash around and feel rewarded by refining your positioning, all while laying out nuke-like fireballs on your enemies. But before you can wield a mighty staff like the Stardust Rod, you have to get through the core components with your Starting Scepter. Its gameplay revolves around balancing between Umbral Ice and Astral Fire, elemental stances that you attune yourself to for certain bonuses. They work as auras that have the element orbit around you. Ice focuses on restoring your mana points, or MP, while Fire spends that MP by making fire spells even stronger. As you level, you can stack these stances multiple times for even better bonuses. This is a class that can bend a couple of rules compared to others, but keep in mind that there are hard rules you can't ignore. Cast as many fire spells as possible, don't use a spell without a stance first, don't let thunder run out. And of course, the ABCs. Always be casting. Black Mage is a job where consistent, stable spellcasting is the very core of its strength. The GCD clock must always be rolling. As it's rolling, it means you're doing something. You're dealing damage, which is your primary goal as a damage dealing class. Keep them rolling, keep attacking, keep casting, always be casting. Every class and job has a unique gauge tied to them to keep track of your gameplay. While I appreciate the creativity, Black Mages can be confusing at first, especially for a new player. There are about 6 parts to focus on. I know that's a lot to pay attention to, so let's break down the whole thing to understand it better, and we'll go over them again slowly as we level up. I don't want to overwhelm you, and by the time you learn a new part of it, the previous one will become second nature to you. There's the Elemental Stance, Enochian, Umbral Hearts, Polyglot, Paradox, and Astral Soul. From the very first level, casting an elemental spell will put you in its respective elemental stance, Umbral Ice or Astral Fire. You can see it with the crystals to the top left and the orb in the middle. In the simplified gauge, there are these diamonds to the lower left. Blue for ice, red for fire. Each stance lasts for 15 seconds, as noted with the countdown here, and each crystal tallies up how many stacks of that stance you are currently attuned to. Casting spells of the respective element refreshes the timer and adds a stack. Casting fire spells with Astral Fire stacks will double its MP cost. Casting ice spells with Umbral Ice stacks makes them cost no MP. Casting the opposite element will have them deal less damage but also cost no MP. The gold section to the right, or sun-like icon on the simplified gauge, is the visual representation of Enochian. Enochian is a passive you get at level 56, and is active when you're in any elemental stance, and gives you bonus magic damage. But if you drop your stance, no Enochian, so be careful about when you're using your spells. At level 58, you'll be able to cast certain ice spells that will give you 3 stacks of Umbral Hearts, which are these icicles to the bottom left, or the diamonds to the right on the simplified gauge. Each one is spent by casting a fire spell, which removes that double MP cost in Astral Fire. Less MP cost means more fire spells to fling out before you run out. Being an Enochian for 30 seconds or more gives you a Polyglot stack, which are these purple diamonds at the bottom, or the right on the simplified gauge, that you start to get at level 70. There will be a clock hand added on top of the gold Enochian section that moves towards the diamonds and fills it with the purple gauge. When it reaches the end, you gain a stack and the clock hand resets. Each one lets you cast extremely powerful void magic spells. The higher your level, the more stacks you'll be able to hold onto and use these spells back to back. Even at maximum stacks, the counter will still be going, so be careful not to waste them. The red-blue diamond to the left, or on top of the polyglot bar on the simplified gauge, is your paradox marker, which lets you cast a strong and useful spell you gain at level 90 that blends fire and ice, refreshing your current stance. You gain it by swapping between stances, from full Umbral Ice and Umbral Hearts into Astral Fire, or from full Astral Fire into Umbral Ice. And finally, the Astral Soul gauge, a hexagram sigil that keeps count over specific fire spells to build up and cast your strongest one at level 100, Blare Star. The simplified gauge is a linear counter instead. Dropping Astral Fire at all will reset the progress prematurely. We begin our journey in Ul'dah, a beautiful desert city. Home sweet home. In the Arzaneth ossuary, we join the Order of Nathal, picking up our class, the Thaumaturge.
I bought a property in Egypt, and what they do for you is they give you the property.
Hey, yo, chill the fuck out, yo. You sitting there playing with...
As a Thaumaturge, intelligence is your main stat, determining your magic damage. Any piece of gear that matters to you will have intelligence. Whatever gets that big brain of yours even bigger. Strength determines your physical damage and how hard you can hit things with your stick. Right. This class has the worst strength scaling in the game. Vitality is also your HP, which you won't have much of. But at least we have the best magic defense. You have some secondary stats too, but you won't have to worry much about them until later on. Grab whatever gear you can find that has intelligence, and that'll be more than enough for now. As long as a piece of gear has a higher item level, or just eye level, than what you have now, it's a worthy upgrade. They'll always come with more intelligence and vitality, more damage, and more health. What more can you ask for? Your scepters, rods, and staves also have a magic damage stat, which represents its power. Even if a staff you come across is just 1 point higher than what you have, it will objectively do better damage. The increase in intelligence is a given. Seriously, the remaining stats could say doo-doo feces plus 500 and it will still deal better damage than your plus 5 crit scepter. There are also stats like auto attack and delay, but these values are so insignificant that I don't think anyone, even the devs, have given it thought for like 10 years now. And at level 1, you'll start with a Blizzard spell and your first trait, Aspect Mastery, which details how your initial stacks of your elemental stance works. Umbral Ice is represented by the orb in the middle being blue, with each stack being represented by these crystals at the top left and the timer to the top right. In the simplified gauge, they're just blue diamonds with the timer to the left. One stack of Umbral Ice, or UI1, will restore 2500 MP per ice spell. Blizzard will give you one stack of Umbral Ice after casting and will refresh the timer. At level 2, you'll learn Fire, which will give you one stack of Astral Fire, or AF1, and refresh its timer. Astral Fire is represented by the orb in the middle and the crystals at the top left being red. In the simplified gauge, the diamonds from before will now be red. Fire is your main source of damage for now. You'll note that the tooltip of Fire says it deals fire damage with a potency of 180, matching with Blizzard. But Thaumaturge and Black Mage have damage bonus passives that these tooltips don't adjust for. AF1 makes fire spells 40% stronger. With it, instead of fire dealing 180 potency, it'll actually deal 252 potency. Casting a spell of the opposite element while you have one stack of it will deal 10% less damage. If you cast fire while in Umbral Ice, you'll end up removing the stance first and deal that nerfed damage. So it'll deal about 162 potency, 18 less than the base amount. This is also known as a cold fire. You'll need to cast fire again to get into Astral Fire, and even then it won't get stronger right away, so that's when it will do the base 180 potency. The same is true for Blizzard, also known as a hot blizzard. While it doesn't gain damage, you won't be restoring MP if it's in Astral Fire, and it still won't restore it until after you're already in Umbral Ice. This is where the element of a spell will be important. Astral Fire only increases damage from fire spells. Umbral Ice only restores MP with ice spells. Your next ability will help you out with this though. At level 4, you'll learn your first ability, Transpose, which swaps your current elemental stance with one stack of the opposite element. Now, instead of spending a spell to remove your stance, then spending another at base potency and no bonuses just to get your first stack, you can use Transpose to get right into utilizing your stances. You'll use up your MP with Fire, then use Transpose to immediately get into Umbral Ice right away. Build up your MP back with Blizzard, Transpose again to go back to Astral Fire, and repeat. At level 6, you'll learn Thunder, a damage over time lightning spell with no cast time and no MP cost. As a damage over time action, or dot, it acts like a poison, dealing damage every 3 seconds while it's applied on an enemy. Since there's no cast time, you're free to move as you use it, and it gives you that opportunity to weave in abilities, like that Transpose you just gained. To use it, you need to enter an elemental stance first. You'll gain this effect, Thunderhead, for the next 30 seconds, allowing you to use it once. You gain Thunderhead every time you enter a stance. Even using Transpose grants and refreshes Thunderhead. Thunder hits for 100 potency right away, and it'll deal an additional 45 potency every 3 seconds over the next 24 seconds. Putting it together, it deals a total of 460 potency. It's definitely very valuable. You want to make the most of it, so you don't want to refresh it too early, as you could be using spells that deal better upfront damage while the damage over time is ticking away. To be efficient, look at how much the status effect of it is left on an enemy. You'll want to refresh it and press Thunder when it's at 3 seconds or less. If it's already dropped, you have a grace period of 3 seconds after to apply it again for minimal damage loss. Now that you have your 3 main elements, you have the very foundation of thaumaturgy at your fingertips. Scepter tip? We should have the basics now. Fire for damage, Ice for MP, Thunder for passive damage over time. We can use everything we have so far and learn our very first opener.
An opener? At level 6?
Let me explain! Openers are more important at endgame levels, so the following lessons are going to be like extra credit. A proper opener and the tips I'll be teaching here at level 6 isn't actually going to matter right now. You're aware of the basics, so it's rather obvious to figure out what to do. The point of what I'm going to teach you here for extra credit isn't really for damage optimization. It's to better understand your actions so you can apply them down the line when it comes to adapting for fights and playing smarter. This will not only prepare you to be a good damage dealer, but to help you understand usable openers later. Open by casting Blizzard, use that Thunder to apply the dot, weave in Transpose to get into AF1, spend your MP to pump out fires for damage. You should be able to cast 6 of them. Swap with Transpose when you're out of MP to get into UI1 and restore it with Blizzards. Refresh that Thunder when needed. Swap again, and repeat. Very simple for now. Remember your Thunder reapplying at 3 seconds or less before it falls off. You might be wondering, why start with Blizzard here? Well, as you have no stance at first, Blizzard and Fire deal the same amount of damage, that base 180 potency. However, Fire costs more MP than Blizzard by 400. At no stance, it deals the same amount of damage for double the cost already. Since getting into any elemental stance allows us to use Thunder, which is instant and has no MP cost, we can use that opportunity to weave in Transpose. And now we're in AF1 with 9600 MP, which will let us use 6 fires. Starting with Fire will start us off with 9200 MP instead. This leads us to only using 5 fires before we end up with 1200 MP, just 400 MP below the cost of Fire and Astral Fire. Again, the idea isn't the better damage. It really doesn't matter at this level. It's to get you used to your actions and how they work. Getting used to these small things early will help you get comfortable in performing better overall. Here's some more extra credit, and a neat trick you can try and get used to. When your cast time is nearly done, you can move and the spell should still go off. This is called Slidecasting and is a very useful way to move little by little when you need to while keeping up damage. It's a very useful technique to learn as a mage, since much of your time is spent standing still and casting. The earlier you get used to it, the better. The exact time is completely based on your latency. For me, I move when there's less than 0.4 seconds left in a cast. It may be a little shorter or longer for you. Pair this knowledge with knowing that your hitbox is not the target ring around your character. It's actually a single pixel in the center of that ring. Only things hitting that pixel will register as actual damage towards you. But if you're in a telegraphed area of attack where your ring is on it, but that pixel is out of it, it won't hit you. Practice it and get the hang of it as soon as you can. At level 8, you'll learn your first roll action, Addle, which lowers an enemy's magic damage by 10% and physical damage by 5%. Addle is pretty useful in raid settings since less enemy damage is always good. Your healers will surely be thankful. At level 10, you'll learn another roll action, Sleep, which does as it says, making your target and enemies around them fall asleep. This isn't important to keep on your hotbars, honestly. You'll only find use for it in the overworld on early level enemies, maybe to stop them so you can get away as you're running around. Almost every enemy is immune to sleep in dungeons, and those that can be affected by it will just wake up as soon as they're hit, usually by an area of effect attack. Don't concern yourself much with it, and if you gotta get rid of it to make space later, do so. Speaking of area of effect attacks, at level 12 you'll learn Blizzard 2, your first one. It deals area of effect, or AoE, ice damage. No, it's not stronger than Blizzard, despite the number on the name. It's actually weaker, just look at the potency. It's meant for hitting multiple enemies at once and is only stronger than Blizzard when hitting 3 or more targets. At level 14 you'll learn another roll action, Lucid Dreaming, which increases your MP regeneration. Lucid Dreaming boosts it by an additional 5% every 3 seconds for the next 21 seconds. Due to how this class works, this is a very situational ability. Thaumaturge theoretically has infinite MP, and you gain back your MP very quickly while in combat through Umbral Ice. Astral Fire actually halts all MP regeneration, even with Lucid Dreaming active. The only uses Lucid Dreaming would have for this class is if you drop your stance with no MP left for a quick Blizzard right away. Or, if out of combat, you can use Lucid Dreaming to bring your MP up again before the next enemy as soon as possible. Just be sure you're not an Astral Fire first. At level 15 you'll learn Scathe from your class quest at this time, a spell with no cast time and is unaspected. Unaspected means it deals general magic damage with no discernible element. It will not gain any bonuses from either stance. Scathe is your weakest spell, but it's actually useful for newer players to deal damage when you need to move until you can better slidecast your stronger spells. It may be weak, but some damage is better than no damage, so it's a crutch until you get the hang of better movement. At level 18 you'll learn Fire 2, an AoE fire spell. Like Blizzard 2, it's also not stronger than Fire and is meant for hitting multiple enemies at once. It also costs almost double the MP Fire does, so you'll only be putting out a few of them at a time. You'll also learn another role action, Swiftcast, which removes the cast time of the next spell you use and lets you deal it out instantly. If you use it before a spell that has no cast time already, like Thunder, Swiftcast won't be used up. It will only activate for your next actual casted spell, so no worries if you're afraid of wasting it, it won't happen. Use Swiftcast when you need to move, if you're still trying to get the hang of slidecasting. Otherwise, use it when you have an opportunity to weave it in, thanks to Thunder. Let's take a closer look at Blizzard 2 and Fire 2 and talk about AoE attacks. Despite that higher number on the spell title, they both deal 80 potency while Blizzard and Fire deal 180 potency. Since Blizzard 2 and Fire 2 are meant to be AoE attacks, they're only useful in multi-target situations. To know how much total damage you're doing there, simply add up the amount of enemies you're hitting with your spells. Hitting 2 enemies with Blizzard 2 and Fire 2 adds up to 160, 80 plus 80. That's less than the 180 that a Blizzard or Fire has, so this is what we call a damage loss. If there's only 2 enemies around, you're better off just using the original versions, which we'll refer to as Blizzard 1 and Fire 1. But if you're hitting 3 enemies at the same time, that becomes 80 plus 80 plus 80, or 240 total potency. Now it's a gain. As Fire 2 is a fire spell, it gains the additional benefit of Astral Fire. That 80 potency now has an additional 40% damage to it, making it 112 potency. 112 times 3 is 336 total potency you're dealing, so the more enemies you hit, the better. Thunder only affects 1 enemy at a time for now, but you'll get an AoE counterpart to it soon. Let's go over how your rotation with AoE actions will work. If you're not in a stance already, open up with Blizzard 2. Throw out a Thunder if you want, preferably on the enemy with the lowest current HP, and weave in that Transpose. Transpose back to Umbral Ice and restore your MP with Blizzard 2. As the enemies are whittling down, try and get used to swapping between the 1 and 2 versions as needed, depending on the number of enemies there are left over. Remember that Fire and Blizzard are better when there's just 1 or 2 enemies at once, and Fire 2 and Blizzard 2 when there are 3 enemies or more at once. You should be getting into your first dungeon soon, so let's recap what we've learned so far. Remember the basics. Fire for damage, Blizzard for MP, Thunder for damage over time, swap with Transpose, and so the cycle goes. If you gotta move to avoid an attack, Slidecast at the end of your cast bar to move around and keep up the damage, always letting the GCD clock roll, even if it means relying on Scathe as you practice, and use Swiftcast to let out a spell immediately without having to stand still to cast it. Some damage is better than no damage. Use Addle to weaken an enemy's attacks. Use Lucid Dreaming after a fight if you're all out of MP so you're ready for the next one. If there's 3 enemies or more around, use those 2-tier spells to hit multiple enemies at once. Once there's only 1 or 2 left, go back to the 1-tier spells instead. Now for the next stretch of the Thaumaturgy journey. At level 20 you'll have Aspect Mastery 2, which allows 2 stacks of an elemental stance. 2 stacks of Umbral Ice, or UI2, will restore 5000 MP per ice spell, meaning you only need to cast about 2 blizzards to get back to full. 2 stacks of Astral Fire, or AF2, makes fire spells 60% stronger. Fire will now be at 288 potency at 2 stacks. Casting a spell of the opposite element will now deal 20% less damage, so Fire would end up being 144 potency if cast in UI2. Remember that Transpose is still a powerful ally. You'll also learn your first Maim and Mend trait. It just provides a permanent passive bonus to damage and HP restoration. These are just general stat increases that every class gets, so there's no need to cover them. At level 26, you'll learn Thunder 2, which, as you can guess, is the AoE counterpart of Thunder. Unlike Blizzard 2 and Fire 2, Thunder 2 is actually stronger at 2 targets or more. This is because Thunder 2's potency is at 60, with the dot dealing 30 potency every 3 seconds for the next 18 seconds. Thunder is at 145. Doing some quick math and you can see what I mean. Remember that Thunder deals a total potency of 460. Thunder 2 deals a total potency of 240. Double that as it'll be on 2 enemies and it comes out to 480 total potency. Where you were applying Thunder before, you can apply Thunder 2 there now. Be sure to adjust between 2 to 3 targets. Remember, Blizzard 2 and Fire 2 are stronger at 3 or more. Thunder 2 is stronger at 2 or more. Yes, Thaumaturge is weird. I know. Now that you're level 30, you can become a Black Mage. It's time to wear the big boy pants, but you still have a bit to go before you can put on the big boy hat. At this level, you'll be able to do your final Thaumaturge class quest and learn Manaward, an ability that creates a personal shield as strong as 30% of your max HP. If you have 1000 HP, the shield will absorb 300 points of damage. It's pretty good utility, and like Addle, it will put less stress on your healers and keep you alive in emergency situations, such as being caught out in an AoE or if you're accidentally aggroing a few enemies before the tank can get to them. If you use Manaward to shield an enemy attack, after the cast bar has completed or the telegraph has gone away, the incoming attack will ignore the shield. Time it wisely. But don't use this as an excuse to ignore attacks and make your healer adjust for you. If you do, I hope you fucking die. Once you graduate from Thaumaturgy School, you'll learn the ways of the Black Mage under Ley, whose first job quest will teach you Manafont, an ability that can only be used in Astral Fire, but it gives you full MP, grants you the Thunderhead effect, and refreshes your Astral Fire timer all at once. This can let you do an entire set of fire spells again, also called a line, immediately after spending your MP without needing to refresh with the weaker Blizzard spells. When you're out of MP and it's available, use it as soon as possible, even in your opener. The more fire spells you can throw out in a fight, the better. If you ever find that Thunder is about to fall off and you no longer have Thunderhead, Manafont can be a good tool to get the effect again and make sure you have full uptime. This tip will be handy as you add more and more spells. Level 35 has several things at once to learn and where things will start to change a bit, but it's only the beginning. You'll learn Aspect Mastery 3, which allows 3 stacks of elemental stances. This is the most you can get. 3 stacks of Umbral Ice, or UI3, will restore full MP after just 1 ice spell, while 3 stacks of Astral Fire, or AF3, makes fire spells 80% stronger, so that fire will now deal a whopping 324 potency. However, casting a spell of the opposite element will now deal 30% less damage, but at half the cast time. So fire will deal 126 potency. And before you think you'll still be needing to transpose to prevent this, think again. This is where the next spells become important, as you'll now learn Fire 3, and from your job quest, Blizzard 3. Both spells will give you all 3 elemental stacks, and casting the opposite element will now completely swap your stance to the maximum. Yes, the 3s will have that reduced damage, but the point is more to allow you to swap stances and get the full effect immediately. No need to transpose between stances anymore, as it only grants a single stack of the opposite element. But don't get rid of it. It'll prove useful again in the future. Blizzard 2 and Fire 2 now act like their 3 counterparts in this way. While using Blizzard 3 to swap, you'll be restoring your MP with just a single Blizzard. You'll also learn Umbral Soul, which is a spell that isn't an attack and can only be used while in Umbral Ice. However, it can grant MP and adds an Umbral Ice stack, like Blizzard 1, but having the added benefit of freezing the timer. The timer will commence again when you use a different ice spell. This will more or less keep Lucid Dreaming for those emergency situations now. Outside of combat, it restores all Umbral Ice stacks and MP at once, regardless of your initial stacks. You can use Transpose after a battle or during downtime, if you're in Astral Fire, to swap to Umbral Ice, and use Umbral Soul to freeze and maximize it, so you can be even more ready for the next fight. With the 3-tier spells at our disposal, we can learn a proper opener that will be important to use for a good while from now. We want to utilize Fire 3 to get into AF 3 right away. It'll take up a good chunk of MP at first, but the damage makes it worth it. Then throw out your Thunder like usual, and get to spamming those fires. When your MP runs out, use Manafont to reset and spam even more fires. Once it runs out again, use Blizzard 3 to get into UI 3 right away. Hope you're still keeping track of that effect timer on Thunder to refresh it when needed. Now that you're in UI 3, you just need one Blizzard to get full MP now. Now you can use that Fire 3 to get back into AF 3, and there's the rotation. Fire 3 and Blizzard 3 should make swapping between stances more comfortable and smooth. It may seem tempting to use only Fire 3 since it has a higher potency than Fire, but it has a long cast time and a massively high MP cost in Astral Fire. The cast time of it is longer than the recast time, and you won't be able to cast much before running out of MP. The long cast time is also why you still want to use Blizzard 1 instead of another Blizzard 3 and Umbral Ice. The focus of Umbral Ice isn't damage, it's to restore your MP. Using Blizzard 3 wastes an entire second of the GCD not rolling and not getting an Astral Fire as soon as possible. We use the Blizzard 1 instead because it gets the job done faster. You should be enhancing your strengths, not making up for weaknesses. Every spell has their use and the right time to use them. The key to mastering Black Mage is knowing when and where to use your spells efficiently. Since you're starting with Fire 3, it takes a bit to cast, around 3.5 seconds. If you or a party member begins a countdown before pulling a boss, you'll get a set amount of time, with the timer of 5 seconds and below flashing at the center of your screen. When you see 4 seconds left, this is a good point to start casting your Fire 3. Usually players don't use countdowns in dungeons, and you'll usually find them in higher end content like grades. At level 40, after completing your next job quest, you'll learn Freeze, another AoE ice spell. It's actually stronger than Blizzard 2 at 3 or more targets, and stronger than Blizzard 1 at 2 or more. But it can only be used in Umbral Ice stance, and it doesn't refresh the timer. Shouldn't be a problem since you only need one ice spell to get all your MP back in UI 3. Freeze deals 120 potency of damage to all enemies it hits, so hitting 2 targets adds up to 240 potency, and 3 targets adds up to 360 potency. Your AoE rotation will now add in Freeze, instead of a second Blizzard 2 or Blizzard 1. Unlike the single target opener, we want to start with ice spells. Like earlier, it's thanks to ice spells having a cheaper base MP cost than fire spells. Starting with Blizzard 2, throw out a Thunder 2, then get right into spamming your Fire 2s, swap back with Blizzard 2, and use Freeze to restore your MP this time. Remember the enemy number priorities. At level 42, you'll learn the Firestarter trait. This makes Fire now have a 40% chance that the next Fire 3 will have no cast time and MP cost. This is why casting Fire 1 is still important, since that free Fire 3 will be thrown in whenever it procs. It can be useful for movement, extra damage, and refreshing your stance. Using it in AF3 is known as AF3 F3P, which means Astral Fire 3, Fire 3 proc. If you happen to have a proc while you're in Umbral Ice, transpose beforehand so your free Fire 3 gets the benefit of AF1, the extra 40% damage, and not the weakened 30% damage of UI 3, giving a cold one. We call this AF1 F3P, Astral Fire 1, Fire 3 proc. Fire 3 in AF3 has a potency of 504. In AF1, it's 392. A cold Fire 3, as well as a hot Blizzard 3, has a potency of 196. the difference between a Cold Fire 3 and an AF1 F3P is greater than when compared to AF3 F3P. If your final fire spell gives you a Firestarter proc, it's better to hold on to it through Umbral Ice to transpose with it, as it's more valuable to change that potential Cold Fire 3. You gain the proc when the GCD clock is about 3/4 of the way done. With enough practice and a keen eye, you can catch the effect to immediately press that Fire 3 next. If you happen to be casting Fire 1 while a proc is active, don't interrupt your cast to use it. It may overwrite the proc, but you'll be wasting time canceling the cast. Since your Astral Fire lines may end up longer than usual, there may be moments where your Thunder will fall off, with no way of refreshing it. This is okay. Continue with your fire attacking as usual and apply it back as soon as you use Manafont or swap back to Umbral Ice. At level 44, you'll learn your last roll action, Surecast, which nullifies most knockback and pull-in effects and prevents your cast from being interrupted by attacks for the next 6 seconds to let you stay still to keep on casting. The knockback pull-in prevention is its main use, though using it to prevent enemy attacks interrupting you can be useful, though rare in practice. It's a massively important role action, so get very familiar with it. It'll have lots of uses in raid settings and mechanics. At level 45, after completing your latest job quest with Thunder Mastery, your Thunder automatically upgrades to Thunder 3, which is just more damage and adds 3 seconds of the debuff, which will extend when needing to refresh Thunder. Congrats! You made it to level 50 and have reached a Realm Reborn's endgame. You can finally wear the big hat.
One fantasy trading later.
The big hat. Oh, you look so cute. Look at your little ears. You'll learn Ethereal Manipulation, an ability that lets you dash to your chosen party member within 25 yalms, which can be very useful for more mobility. A personal recommendation I have is to make Ethereal Manipulation into a mouse over macro. For Ethereal Manipulation, making it a mouse over macro will allow you to use it and dash to a party member by just hovering your mouse over their character or their name on the party list. No need to untarget the enemy or click on the right party member first. To do this, type the following lines: /m error off to remove any error message just in case, /AC quotation Ethereal Manipulation quotation less than MO greater than to type out the action itself and using MO to make it a mouse over ability, /AC quotation Ethereal Manipulation quotation without the MO to have it work like normal as a backup, /M icon quotation Ethereal Manipulation quotation to have the icon of the macro be of the ability itself. If you're playing on controller, yeah, I don't have anything. If there are any controller players with tips on how to make skills like Ethereal Manipulation work easier, feel free to write it out in the comments below. From your latest job quest, you'll now learn Flare, a strong AoE fire spell that spends all your remaining MP. It needs at least 800 to cast it and can only be used in Astral Fire. It's meant to be the main source of damage for your AoE attacks. It's also our first AoE spell that has damage fall off. If you look at the tooltip, it says that it deals 240 potency, but it deals 30% less for remaining enemies. This means the enemy you're actually targeting will get dealt the full 240 potency of damage, but surrounding enemies will only receive 70% of that damage, which is 168 potency. So thinking about the total potency we'll be hitting enemies will be a little bit more complex. If we hit 2 enemies with Flare, add up 240 for the one you're targeting and 168 for the second one, giving you 408 potency. Adding a third adds another 168, giving us a total of 576 potency. These also aren't taking AF3 into account, which upgrades these potencies to 432, 734, and 1037 respectively. Very powerful. With Flare, something else to note is that the cast time is notably longer than the recast time, like Fire 3 and Blizzard 3. But we use those only for the beginning of a fight and to quickly swap between stances. Despite that higher potency, the high MP cost and cast time doesn't make it worth it to use after stance swapping. However, with Flare, you may notice it's much stronger than Fire at a fairly minimal cast time increase and with an arguably minimal MP cost. Well, Flare isn't just for AoE and actually has a single target use. You'll now want to use it at the end of your Astral Fire Lines when you're less than 2400 MP. Usually you'll end up at 2000 MP, which is where you want to use Flare then. It's time for another round of extra credit where we can dive deeper into a new subject that helps shows Flare's strength and that may help in determining what spells are worth it over others during certain situations. So let's talk about Potency per second, or PPS. A spell's potency is a direct point of reference that we can use to determine how much actual damage it will deal. Potency per second is a way to calculate that damage being dealt over time, which leads into calculating our damage per second, or DPS. How we find it is by taking the potency and dividing it by the cast time or recast time, whichever is longer. Scathe is instant, but it's still reliant on the GCD, so its recast is the same as every other spell, being 2.5 seconds by default. As an example, Scathe is 100 potency, so to find its PPS, divide that 100 by 2.5, and you'll see that it deals 40 potency per second. Using Fire as another example, it deals 180 potency and has a cast time of 2.5 seconds. So 180 divided by 2.5 gives us 72 PPS. If you want to apply the bonus we gain from AF3, we can multiply these values by 1.8, making Fire's PPS be 129.6. PPS helps us think about the many situations a spell could be useful over another, and to further help adapt for certain situations. Let's bring this all to that new fire spell you learned, Flare. That cast time is 3 seconds long, with its potency at 240 for your main target. 240 potency divided by 3 seconds is 80 PPS. Multiplying it by 80% from AF3 gives us 144 PPS instead. This doesn't mean you should be using Flare as your primary attack though. It eats up all your remaining MP at once, and you'll want to keep on using Fire 1 for those Firestarter procs. How we use our fire spells efficiently at this time is focusing on Fire 1 for damage, using those free Fire 3s when they come up, and spending the last bit of MP you have on a Flare to finish the line. It'll also get us in the habit of preparing us for an even stronger spell you'll learn as a better single target finisher later on. Higher PPS can be achieved if a spell like Flare can be instant, making the time to divide it by through the recast instead. So with Swiftcast, we can pair them together. Making Flare instant cast, and AF3 Flare being 432 potency, divided by 2.5 seconds instead, gives us 172.8 PPS. But recall that I mentioned you should use Swiftcast if you can weave it in with an instant cast spell like Thunder 3. While clipping certain abilities can be worth it, as the pros outweigh the cons, like Transpose and Manafont, that's not the case with Swiftcast. Using abilities puts you into an animation lock for 0.7 seconds. While Swiftcast could reduce the time of a long spell, like Flare, if you clip it, you're adding those 0.7 seconds of that GCD not rolling. And you should be aware how important it is that it keeps moving. Because of this, the time it takes to get the Flare out and to begin casting the following spell becomes 3.2 seconds. This results in a lower PPS for Flare than if you hard casted it. Therefore, for damage, only pair Swiftcast with long spells if you can safely weave it in. Otherwise, it's better to hard cast it. Now that we reached a big milestone at level 50, it's time to upgrade our opener and rotation. We build on what we've learned so far, just adding in Flare at the end of our lines. You begin casting Fire 3 at the 4-second mark of a countdown, then immediately throw out that Thunder 3. Cast your fires and hard cast Flare to spend your remaining 1600 MP. Clip in Manafont to start over. Cast more fires. And hard cast Flare next time. Then get into Umbral Ice with Blizzard 3, get your MP back with Blizzard 1, and repeat. If that last fire gives you a Firestarter proc, try to hold on to it through Umbral Ice, and remember to transpose after your MP is back to get the damage boost from AF1. Remember to throw in whatever other free Fire 3's proc almost immediately during Astral Fire. Due to the RNG nature of the rotation so far, an Astral Fire line can be pretty long or pretty short. If Thunder 3 falls off because you have no way of refreshing it, remember that's okay. Just refresh it as soon as you get Thunderhead again. Keep on using Flare when you're at less than 2400 MP. Usually you'll be at 2000 MP. If you cast Fire instead here, it'll leave you 400 MP short. Pair Flare with a Swiftcast and you can weave it in for higher PPS. Use Aetherial Manipulation to get to safe spots with your party members, and Surecast when you want to avoid knockback and pull-in mechanics. Your AoE rotation will now consist of focusing on Flare only. Instead of Fire 2 spamming, we simply just cast a Flare and spend our MP at once. Then going back to Umbral Ice with Blizzard 2, and Freeze for better AoE damage. Then swapping back to Astral Fire with Fire 2. Recall how much potency Flare deals when hitting 2 targets, being 408 potency. We already determined how Flare on one target is higher PPS than Fire, so we can better see that Flare is a damage gain on 2 targets already. Since Flare is at such a high potency, Fire 2 is unfortunately too low to spam it anymore. This will only get easier to manage down the line once we upgrade certain spells and learn others later on. As you're practicing, take things at your own pace. Don't forget the basics, and always take the time to practice. Go back to a striking dummy whenever you'd like to get the hang of things. And if you ever find yourself messing up or making a multitude of mistakes on your first time, please don't feel discouraged. Don't worry too much about slip-ups here and there. We all make them. What really separates the noobs from the pros comes down to your mindset. Ask yourself this at the end of every duty. Did you try your best? Are you going to try better next time? If your answers to these are yes, then that's all there is to it. You'll have the makings of a master caster just yet. Reaching a Realm Reborn's endgame, we can take the chance to talk a bit more about secondary stats and raid buffs. Remember that item level is always important. The higher, the better. They will always provide an increase to your main stats and your damage. You also have a few secondary stats you come across on your gear that you might be curious about, so let's talk about the ones important for a Black Mage. Critical hit determines how often you'll deal critical damage and how strong that critical damage will do. You must have seen by now when you'd have done a critical attack, as the damage number will have a single exclamation mark. Direct hit determines how often you'll deal direct hit damage, which is essentially a mini crit, always dealing 25% bonus damage. The damage number ends up being slightly larger than normal when they occur. Direct hits and critical hits can overlap, and when they do, known as a direct crit hit, the following damage number has a double exclamation mark. Determination provides a small percentage increase in base damage numbers. Unlike critical hit and direct hit, the increase is not based on any chance and is always active. Spell speed affects cast and recast speed, reducing it from the base of 2.5 seconds. It also provides a tiny increase in the dot damage of thunder.
How do I choose the best one for Black Mage?
That's the neat thing. You don't.
Black Mage is a special job where you have more free reign than others when it comes to choosing your secondary stats. At this level though, it's especially not something to worry about. The gear you have on, as is more than enough. But at least you know what they each do and how they affect your gameplay. Long story short, there's no bad stat for this job. For now, just worry about making sure your eye level is as high as it can be. Something you'll be wanting to consider more now are party status effects, or raid buffs. At level 50, not many classes have access to them, but there are more you'll see the higher you level. As a DPS job, you'll want to make sure you're throwing in your best spells during these moments. Again, we want to be enhancing our strengths. Black Mage doesn't provide any raid buffs to the party. Instead, your damage is the raid buff. So it's all the more important that you keep these moments in mind and ensure you're always casting. You'll soon learn stronger spells that will be saved for these moments. Let's go over what you'll see at level 50. For damage increase buffs, there's Divination and the cards from Astrologian, and Mage's Ballad from Bard. Due to how Astrologian's card draws work, they have to draw a balance first. They'll only have access to just one or the other at a given time, so either card you get is good. For debuffs, there is Vulnerability Up from Ninja. For direct hit rate increase, there's Battle Voice and Army's Paeon from Bard. If you're currently casting a spell and a buff is applied to you during the cast, that spell will now benefit from it. Dots do keep the benefits of whatever buffs or debuffs are applied on an enemy, even if those effects expire during its duration. This is where refreshing Thunder early becomes important. It's important to snapshot Thunder during raid buffs if A. Thunder is about to fall off, and B. Raid buffs are about to end. This way you'll have as many ticks going as possible at first, prioritizing stronger on-hit spells beforehand, and making sure the next Thunder 3 will take advantage of those buffs. If you do this and you're still buffed with just Divination as an example, Thunder 3 will now deal 604 total potency. Even dot ticks take advantage of crit and direct hit rates. Though you won't see it so obviously, each tick can crit and direct hit independently, making snapshotting even in buffs like Battle Voice important too. And now, before you do anything else, you can finally earn the greatest of all Black Mage staves, the defining weapon of a true master caster, the Stardust Rod. Yes, I know it's only eye level 80. Yes, I know your Ironworks one is statistically better. Yes, I know what I said.
Pick it up. Pick it up.
Attaboy. We've conquered the base game, but our leveling is only halfway done and we still have 5 expansions ahead of us. In Heavensward, we'll start learning the foundation of how the job really plays. Hey, don't worry, champ. You're having fun, aren't you?
Well, this sucks.
At level 52, you'll learn Ley Lines, which creates a circle around you that stays for 30 seconds. While standing in it, you'll gain this buff known as Circle of Power, which grants a 15% haste, reducing your cast and recast times. You'll be throwing out your spells even faster, but this will set in your turret gameplay. When standing outside of your Ley Lines, you'll lose the Circle of Power buff, so keep an eye out for it. This will be your first 2-minute buff that will synergize with raid buffs. Faster casting means more spells, which means more damage, and more of them to fit in burst windows. It's also your first ability that has multiple charges. This allows you to have an extra usage of it. It shares the cooldown of the initial charge. Not only do you use the ability every 2 minutes, but the extra charge can allow you to use it in an odd number minute of your choice. Use it where you feel is best, preferably at the start of an Astral Fire line. It will vary from player to player and from fight to fight. The extra Ley Lines is best used where you feel extra damage is welcome for a certain phase, and when you know you won't be moving much during them. While AoEs landing over your Ley Lines can be annoying, try to use this as an opportunity to learn fights better and think more about positioning. Remember that your hitbox is just a single pixel under you. With this knowledge and enough practice, you can not only place your Ley Lines in a good spot, but also take advantage of your hitbox to utilize the most area of that whole circle. As long as your pixel is within the circle, you can cast faster. Make it a habit to place yourself at the edges of the Ley Line circle. That way you can bait any incoming telegraphs to that edge, and you might be able to dodge it while having a safe area within that Ley Lines, ensuring you never lose its benefit. At level 56, you'll learn Enochian, a new part to your gauge and your new best friend. It's the gold piece to the bottom right of your gauge and the sun-like icon to the left of the simplified gauge. Now when you're in an elemental stance, all magic damage is 5% stronger. As an example, fire will be dealing about 340 potency thanks to Enochian. From now on, you'll want to be sure your Thunder 3s are only used while in a stance to have that bonus damage. This is why I stated that one of the hard rules was to not use a spell without a stance first, as to get you into the habit early. If Thunder 3 is used while Enochian is active, the damage is boosted to about 598 total potency. At level 58, you'll learn Umbral Heart, which adds another part to your gauge, the icicles to the bottom left and the white diamonds to the right of your elemental ones in the simplified gauge. This allows stacking of Umbral Hearts, each one removing the double MP cost of fire spells while in Astral Fire. Manafont, Umbral Soul, and Freeze will now grant Umbral Hearts. Manafont and Freeze grant all three at once, always. Umbral Soul only grants all three while out of combat. In combat, you only get them one at a time, just like your Umbral Ice stacks. Flare uses them all up, but will now only use up 2/3 of your current MP, so you can add a second flare at the end of your AoE lines. Pair it with Manafont and you can let out 4 of them back to back. You'll also learn Blizzard 4, which is where your main source of Umbral Hearts come from. It's essentially the single target counterpart to Freeze. You'll be using it to not only get Umbral Hearts, but also get your MP back while in Umbral Ice, so no more needing to cast the Blizzard 1 anymore. The original Blizzard spell is your only action that will not see any use from here on. Every other action has some use, even at 100. Freeze is now only a gain on 3 targets. Like Freeze, Blizzard 4 can only be used if you're already in Umbral Ice. It does not refresh the stance timer or give you a stack. Better get used to using spells being like this, because now that you're level 60, you've reached Heavensward's endgame. And once you finish your job quest here, I'm not wearing that. Ah! You'll learn Fire 4.
With feeling.
You'll learn Fire 4, your new main source of damage.
Better.
Prick. Your goal now as a Black Mage is to cast as many Fire 4s as possible. This removes much of the RNG nature of fishing for Firestarter procs. Like Blizzard 4, you can only use it when already in your stance. It does not refresh the timer or give you a stack of Astral Fire. Since Fire 4 is so much stronger than Fire 1, the pros outweigh the cons. Recall that Enochian adds 5% bonus damage, as well as the benefit of AF3. The potency on the tooltip of Fire 4 states it's 320. Adding those passives we have now makes it almost 605 potency. Aside from it looking cool as shit, due to it being so much stronger than Fire 1, you can see why we'll have to use it now in say Fire 1 for just refreshing our timer. It's also stronger than Flare, making using it at the end of our single target lines not worth it anymore. Even Swiftcast doesn't make it stronger, so you can use it for Fire 4s now. Remember not to clip it though. You can use the Umbral Hearts as an indicator as to when you should refresh Astral Fire. You can also use the timer. Usually best to use Fire 1 when the timer has about 3 to 4 seconds left, since Fire 4's base cast time is 2.8 seconds long. Try to follow what is known as a 3-3 split. 3 Fire 4s, refresh with Fire 1, then 3 more Fire 4s. This is just a general recommendation, and if your spell speed is higher, you can cast 1 or 2 more Fire 4s before needing to refresh. If you try to cast Fire 4 while Astral Fire expires during it, the cast will interrupt and you'll lose out on your stance. It's important to keep up that timer. Losing stance means losing out on damage, and you'll only lose out on more without Enochian. The goal is to get at least 6 Fire 4s per Astral Fire line. Now we can learn a new opener that will be the foundation for future ones and set in your rotation from here on out. Open with Fire 3 and Thunder 3 after like usual. Weave in your new Ley Lines, then cast 5 Fire 4s. Use Manafont after to refresh yourself. Cast 3 more Fire 4s. Refresh your stance with fire, then spend the rest of your MP on more Fire 4s. Head into Umbral Ice with Blizzard 3 and restore your MP and Umbral Hearts with Blizzard 4. If you don't have enough spell speed to cast that last Fire 4 before Manafont, use Swiftcast for it. If the fire gave you a Firestarter proc, you want to now hold onto it through Umbral Ice and use Transpose after for the AF1 F3P technique I taught you earlier. You know when to refresh Thunder, of course, trying to snapshot it at the very end of raid buffs also. As Manafont gives you Umbral Hearts now, you can do a full Astral Fire line using a total of 6 Fire 4s. Remember to use Manafont anytime you're low on MP and when it's off cooldown. While you want to keep the Firestarter proc for AF1 F3P after Umbral Ice, the Firestarter proc can still be used in AF3 to refresh your timer, just in case it's about to fall off. Staying in a stance is always better than dropping it even for a split second, especially now that you have Enochian. If you don't have it, you could cast another Fire 1. Getting into this situation though should never happen, and is a result of not learning your ABCs enough. Practice your uptime and you won't have to worry about dropping your stance even with a minor mistake. Use Ley Lines every 2 minutes and use that second charge when you need extra damage for a specific phase. Now that most of the randomness has been reduced to only the AF1 F3P, you'll start to see how the job fundamentally works from here on out, with much more consistency. Stick with the 3-3 split for Fire 4s and you have your set rotation. Any more we'll learn will build on what we've learned here. The goal is to have as many Fire 4s and other strong spells out as much as possible. Our AoE rotation will now add in a second flare, thanks to the Umbral Hearts we received from Freeze. You'll want to start with Blizzard 2, Thunder 2, Freeze, then get to your back-to-back flares before restarting. Even though Flare isn't viable in single target anymore, it's actually stronger than Fire 4 at 2 targets. Now to keep an eye out for new raid buffs you'll see by level 60. For damage increase, there's Embolden from Red Mage, and Standard Finish from Dancer if you're the dance partner. For critical hit rate increase, there's Battle Litany from Dragoon, and the Wanderer's Minuet from Bard. After this point, I was going to cover the rest from level 62 onwards. The level 70 opener, stat pots, level 70 raid buffs, the level 80 opener, burst window priorities and juggling, raid buffs then, further leveling, and the 2 openers that would be your options at level 90, comparing them a little, double weaving, even non-standard, some lines there, sharing the primer, how to better end fights and phases, and into Dawn Trail, more info about secondary stats and tiers, high crit versus high spell speed builds, learning the level 100 openers and comparing the two with further research and better math that I put into it to show their viability to give the players valid options with an actual 1 DPS difference at its largest. Yes, I did accept the criticisms I had on mine, and I even changed the name. Yes, I even wrote a joke in about how I named it after me. I shouldn't have done that. Yes, I'm an egotistical, narcissistic piece of shit. It's part of the charm. Anyways, there was much and more I was excited to go over and teach, and I'm always up for answering questions and helping people out, regardless. I didn't give much of an opinion on my last video about the upcoming soft rework, and I'm going to make another video further going into it because, well, it was going to go here, but I have too much to say. So to summarize, please don't remove the stance timer. Black Mage's kit doesn't make sense without it. If you want to rework us, rework us. But don't half-ass it. Have a direction and have it make sense. That's all I really want. Until then, hopefully I'll see you all on Twitch. I'm ending my break soon, streaming 4 times a week again, and we'll be hopping into much more games, especially into Soulsborne and Elden Ring content that I'm so excited to start on. At least I can say a weight has been lifted from me. Hope you all enjoyed, and hope to see you all around some more. And wherever you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.